Okay, folks, welcome to our streaming church video blog. And this is kind of an informal time. We're going to broadcast every week about this time. And it's going to be about 10 or 15 minutes or so, not real long, but we want to kind of help you answer some questions you might have about streaming video. We'll do some stuff that's, some of it's kind of simple, others will get a little more complex. And so I want to invite you, as you watch this, feel free to type in your questions you might have regarding what we're talking about. I'm Phil Thompson, and this is Steve Lacy, and we're glad that you have logged on and to be with us. Today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about kind of the bare essentials of what you really need to start streaming at your church or even your small business. So I'm going to let Steve talk here for a couple minutes about cameras.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the outline here. I get this question a lot. What is it going to take for me to stream? And basically, it folds into just 3 or 4 components. You've got to have a camera, obviously, in order to videotape. You've got to have a computer and the ability to hook that camera to that computer. And you got to have an internet connection where you're at. And with those 3 things, and then with our service or other services as the internet provider, then you can stream. So it's really simple. These are things that most churches already have. They already have cameras. They already have computers. They already have internet connections. And so what I was going to do is walk you through just some of the, as Phil mentioned, the bare bones things that you need to do or to have in order to broadcast. So this is going to be kind of geared towards entry level. As we go on and do some of these sessions later on, we're going to get into some of the higher end. So I was just going to walk you through. So camera, number one thing that you need to do with the camera is, there's a rule of thumb we have, is the better the lighting and the closer you can get to your subject, then the less expensive camera you can use. So if you've got a service that is rather dim and you've got to put cameras in the back of the sanctuary, you're going to want to move from a consumer grade camera up to a prosumer. And again, I'm talking entry level things here.
Well, let me just interject. Like today, we are simply using a cam that you have that's a consumer cam that you bought a few years ago.
Yes.
In fact, there are some links. If you're looking here on our platform, you'll see some little links at the bottom here that you can feel free to click on that kind of expands a little more of what we're talking about here. We've got one on here that is basically Steve's cheap cam that we're actually using right now.
Yeah, it is. It's a hand-me-down cam, and one of the reasons that I selected this camera is it's very easy to connect up to. We're running actually off a laptop, so we're broadcasting off of a laptop. So when you're going from a laptop, it kind of constrains your connection options. So this camera happens to have a FireWire. So there's the camera. I went today, and this thing's, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and I went on eBay just to look up some things, and they have some finished sales for $50, and I think this link that's on the site right now will take you to the camera, and actually this morning it was going for like $10, so Whoa. It had a couple of bids on it.
Hey.
So feel free to click if you want to get, this will give you an idea. If this is, we're just doing actually a spare room in my house with just normal lighting, so this is what we're going off of. Okay. I even have some churches, and I really don't recommend this, but we have some churches that just use a webcam that's connected right up to their computer. And with a webcam, I just had a church that just started broadcasting a couple of weeks ago, and they went and just bought a $50 webcam, and it looked all right. One of the challenges that I saw in it is you don't have the ability to zoom. So and they were at the back of a sanctuary. So you're at the back of a sanctuary, you feel people look like start to look like ants on the stage. So you want to get a camera that has the ability to zoom in on your subjects. The other consideration in purchasing a camera is to make sure that you have a vehicle to connect it to the computer. Now, if you're connecting up to a desktop computer, that's going to open your options up because you have video card that's with the computer, or you can purchase video cards that'll take various inputs. But if you're going with a laptop, you're going to want to consider, is there a USB connection or a FireWire connection, or what's my connection between the camera and the laptop?
Just real quickly, and there's a little thumbnail down here. on the page here, and people can click on it and it'll open it up a little bit. But what's the difference between like a FireWire and a USB cable?
Well, FireWire is a little older technology than the USB 2.0, but it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. FireWire was introduced with, like a lot of things, it was introduced on the Mac by Apple.
Your favorite?
Yes, yes. So it's just it's a communication technology that some of the cameras have. I think majority of cameras you're going to buy today, though, are going to be more USB based.
Right.
But FireWire is more generic. One of the things to consider when you're getting a camera, and I've run into this with some other churches we deal with, is some of the connections via USB will only work with the software that they provide with the camera. So the only thing it does is provide a communications channel between the camera and the laptop. So, you know, if you want to use their product to move your pictures over, it works great. But when you want to go to an encoder and capture some live video, the encoders don't recognize it. So that's a consideration.
Okay. While we're on encoders, okay, let's move on here a little. By the way, if you have any questions related to kind of what we're talking about, or even if you don't have anything on this particular subject, you can still type it in. If we can't get to it today, we'll get to it in a future broadcast. We're going to be doing this every Thursday night at this time.
And we'll be archiving these as well.
And we will be archiving them, so you can get to them later. And they're only going to be about 10 or 15 minutes, so we're running out of time here, but feel free to type in your questions, and we'll try to field them here, okay?
One last comment, though, on the cameras. Just advice is, and we did this at our church, is I would start low and grow. So actually at our church we started with consumer grade camera just to get some experience with it, and then a few months into it moved up to a prosumer camera and just kind of moved up the food chain there. Okay. If you're already broadcasting, or recording your service is not a thing. So go ahead.
Encoders.
Encoders.
What's the deal with, we generally recommend Adobe Flash encoders, but there's Windows encoders. What's the difference? And
from the encoding end, for you as the the broadcaster, there's really not much difference. It's just some different technology, a slightly different user interface, whether you go with the Windows Media Encoder or the Adobe Live Encoder. They're both free downloads. The main difference that we have found is on the viewing end, that if you're going flash, your viewers are going to have a lot fewer problems.
And why is that?
It has to do with how Microsoft, what will typically happen is that the viewer won't have the right ActiveX component on their computer, and it'll put a little thin yellow band at the top of their window that they won't see that will say, allow this ActiveX component, which is the Windows Media Player, to play, and it won't play until they say, yeah, it's okay to play. But a lot of times people just don't see it.
People miss it.
Yeah, they miss it and they get frustrated and they just leave. So with Flash, it just works. So we've been kind of steered towards Flash.
Okay, all right. I don't want to get ahead of you here, but what about speed? And I run across churches that their speed or upload speed may not be a good thing for them. What do we need here to broadcast?
That's another consideration, is you're going to want to go out and do a speed test from the facility. And a lot of people say, oh, my download speed is 1.5 megabytes. It really doesn't matter. What you want to measure is your upload speed. So we send you to speedtest.net. That will just give you some raw numbers, and you're going to want to have at least 400 to 500 kilobits per second upload. You can get by with less. And so one of the nice things with the encoder is you can set the bit rate that you're going to broadcast with. So what you're going to want to do is, as you set the bit rate you're going to broadcast with, you want to go 100 kilobits per second less than your worst upload score. Okay. So go to speedtest.net a few times, run it different times of the day, Sunday morning, Saturdays, whatever. Right. Find out what your lowest score is. And if you've got a marginal network connection, then you're going to want to bump down your encoding speed. Okay. We typically recommend 200 to 300 kilobits per second. We're broadcasting right now at 200 kilobits per second on the video. And so you can go full screen, and it doesn't look too bad.
Now, we actually have the links for speed test on here, and you can see it on your screen, or you can click on that. That will open up, and you can do a test. There are some other things that they may want you to buy or see when you get on.
That's true. They are a free service, but they're trying to draw you in. So around the perimeter, they've got buy this, do that.
Yeah, so just be careful about that. But
hit the begin test button up on the speed test.
What about the ping test?
Ping test really measures the quality of your connection. So it'll go through and look at latency and packet loss. So you're going to want to have a fairly strong ping test. What it'll do is it'll go through and spit out a bunch of numbers, and they simplified it at pingtest.net and give you a grade. So you're going to want to see or better on your ping test.
Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, so all right, so we covered a little bit about speed here. Let's talk really briefly about computers. What do they need to stream? Do they need to have the highest end computer, the most expensive computer? Does it have to be a Mac?
It can be either a Mac or a PC, and actually the encoding load on the computer is actually not real heavy. So you just need a marginal computer that you've purchased within the past 2 or 3 years. You'd be really pushing it, going and grabbing a 8-year-old computer, unless it was a fairly high-end computer 8 years ago. But you're going to want to be able to run the encoder on the computer, and if it's geared for if you're just doing the encoding on that computer, then you'd be a little bit safe. If you need to run your projector screens and that sort of thing off the same computer, you're going to want a little beefier computer. But one of the things you want to do is download the encoder, the Adobe Live Media Encoder we encourage you to do, and start broadcasting, and then just do a CPU load test. So you do the old Control-Alt-Delete task manager thing, and you're gonna, if you peak at 100%, then
that's not good.
That is not good. You will buffer. Another common question, just talking about internet connections, rule of thumb is if everyone sees the same buffering and pausing, that means the issue is between you and the streaming server.
All right, now repeat that one more time, because that's one that everybody seems to miss.
Yeah, so if everyone at the same time starts to see buffering and skipping, that means that you're not able to transmit your signal from your facility to the server. There's some buffering or packet loss.
Okay.
If individuals, one guy says it looks great for me and everything's just fine, and someone else is, says it started to buffer for me, then it's between them and the server.
Okay. It could be the network that they're on.
It could be the network on. It could be the broadcast. You may be broadcasting too high. You may want to consider offering a lower bandwidth broadcast as well.
Okay. We're running out of time here, but let's talk briefly about streaming providers. Obviously, Streaming Church TV is a streaming service provider, but there's other guys out there too.
Yes, there's you can stream for free at Ustream or Livestream. So that's a way to get into this and get experience. There are some caveats that when they don't, it may not cost you any money to do that, but they will push advertisements.
And some of the ads, and not to knock them because I think that's good, but some of the ads can be a little bit awkward. Is that a good way to say if you're doing a sermon or something?
What were you telling me yesterday?
Well, I was talking to somebody on the phone, and they've been using one of those two that you mentioned, and an ad for condoms came up on the screen, and so it was a little awkward for people.
Something you don't see at church too often.
Not very often, especially if you're Roman Catholic. But hey, we won't get into that. That's just a joke. But so there are other providers, but they do have their pros and cons.
Right, and then there's other paid providers there. We're finding now that we've been doing this for a little while, is there's more and more companies cropping up that are geared for the streaming market. So there's us. There's some that have been around longer than we have. 360 Networks, I think, is one.
Okay, yeah.